Hi, welcome to our channel where we share the most intriguing stories. 30 years of sweat, scars, and red Texas soil, all nearly stolen by a glitch in a greedy HOA. When a stubborn rancher is told his land no longer belongs to him, he doesn't call it quits. He saddles up for war. This isn't just a land dispute, it's a rebellion. I bought this land 30 years ago with my bare hands and the last of my late father's money. 1,200 acres of red Texas dirt, creeks, pastures, and mesquite trees, older than some counties. I buried 2 dogs, 1 marriage, and my best years on this soil. And up until last week, the only fights I had were with coyotes, droughts, and the occasional rusted fence post that decided to jump me from the shadows. Now I'm apparently at war with a goddamn homeowners association I've never met, never joined, and never asked for. It started, as most things do, with a letter. Came on a Wednesday. The kind of envelope that smells like legal threats and cold coffee, white, thick, printed address. No return name, just a P.O. box. Inside was a folded notice with a fancy green header that read, Cedar Hills Homeowners Association. I thought maybe it was junk mail. Maybe one of those annoying HOA newsletters people accidentally send to the wrong mailbox. I wasn't even inside city limits, let alone some picket fence suburb. But when I unfolded it, my stomach dropped. They were demanding I bring the northern section of my property into compliance with Cedar Hills community standards, effective immediately. Complaints included unauthorized agricultural structures, non-compliant fencing, and improper signage. They even included a photo, grainy and distant, like Bigfoot paparazzi, of my cattle gate and the old red barn I rebuilt myself after a tornado split it in 2. I laughed out loud, not because it was funny, but because it was absurd. My land wasn't part of any community besides the one God and the U.S. Postal Service recognized. I figured it was some kind of clerical mistake and tossed the letter on the table under my coffee cup, where all junk mail goes to die. But that was wishful thinking. 3 days later, I was out checking the eastern fence line when I saw a white SUV crawling down my private road. Now, I don't get visitors. You don't just swing by a ranch like mine unless you're lost or planning to be buried in the backfield. So when this SUV didn't turn around, I waited. Out stepped a woman who looked like she ironed her eyebrows and sprayed her teeth with Teflon. Mid-50s, short blonde bob, khakis so stiff I could have sliced bales with them. She was clutching a clipboard like it was the Constitution. "You must be Mr. Rhodes," she called, walking toward me in flat beige shoes that had no business being off pavement. "I must be," I said, resting my hand on the post. "And you are?" "Karen Lansdale," she beamed, president of the Cedar Hills HOA. She extended a manicured hand like she was meeting a senator. I didn't take it. She cleared her throat and continued, undeterred. "I'm here to discuss your non-compliance with our development standards. We sent you a notice last week." "I got your threat letter," I cut in. "Let me save you the drive back. I'm not in your HOA. My land ain't part of your development, and I've got deeds older than your haircut to prove it." She gave a tight little laugh, the kind that says, "Oh, you poor, dumb man." Then she flipped through her clipboard and produced a map. It looked official, shiny lines, colored sections. Right there, highlighted in yellow, were 500 acres of my land, labeled Cedar Hills Phase Taosu Expansion. You see, this section was formally included in the Cedar Hills Planning District as of last year. The council voted on it. It's part of our future growth overlay. I blinked. "You people voted to take my land?" "Well," she said, lips twitching, "the expansion falls under the Community Zoning Initiative. It's entirely legal. And while we'd prefer to work cooperatively, failure to bring your property into compliance will result in daily fines and, eventually, legal action." My blood ran cold, but I smiled. "Ma'am, do you have any idea how badly you're screwing up?" She narrowed her eyes like I was a fly buzzing too close. "I've lived here since before your subdivision was a damn trailer park. I paid for this dirt with money I earned under fire. There ain't a court in this state that'll give you so much as a fence post on my land." She looked at me the way people look at cattle that won't get in the trailer. "Mr. Rhodes, you'll find that community cooperation benefits everyone. There's no need for hostility." "And yet, here we are," I said, nodding toward her SUV. "Take your papers and leave. You're trespassing." She hesitated, then tucked the clipboard back under her arm. You'll be hearing from our attorneys. Consider this your formal notice." "I'll frame it," I muttered as she turned on her heel and marched back to her car. When the dust settled and her taillights disappeared down the road, I stood there for a long time. I wasn't just pissed, I was stunned. Somewhere, someone had drawn a line through my property, stuck a label on it, and expected me to roll over and smile. I headed back to the house, yanked the original deed out of the safe, and called Ben Walker, my old Army buddy turned attorney. He was the kind of guy who could chew through tax code while drinking a beer and skinning a rattlesnake. I emailed him the documents and a photo of the map that woman had shown me. He called me back an hour later. "There's something fishy here," he said. "The county zoning database has a mismatch. The public-facing parcel map does show part of your land in the Cedar Hills overlay, but the deed record shows clear ownership dating back to your father. I need to dig deeper." "Do it," I said. "They're trying to steal half my ranch. I'm not letting that happen." I looked out the window at the barn, at the pastures, the windmill spinning lazily in the distance. They picked the wrong cowboy. Ben called the next morning, just past 7, before I'd had my second sip of coffee. That was never a good sign. "You're not going to like this," he said. "I already don't." I went through the parcel history, land use filings, county zoning board archives, all of it. Your deed is clean, but the GIS overlay used by the planning department, it's showing 500 acres of your land as part of Cedar Hills Phase 2, not as proposed land, actual recorded inclusion. "That's not possible," I said, setting the mug down. "It is if someone tampered with the data or if there was a migration error. County did a full system overhaul last spring. They switched platforms and outsourced the transition to some tech firm in Austin. There've been mapping anomalies reported. But here's the kicker. They flagged your section for review, never resolved it, and left the false data in the live map. That's what the HOA is banking on. So, a glitch made my land look unclaimed?" "Exactly, and HOA got creative with that. Ben told me this kind of maneuver wasn't common, but not unheard of. Technically, if land appears non-designated or unregistered in zoning databases, certain community overlays can apply for emergency integration under land use ambiguity clauses. It was designed for abandoned industrial properties, but Cedar Hills was using it like a crowbar, and I had 500 acres of leverage they wanted. I'd been through legal crap before, mostly ranch disputes over water lines or grazing rights. But this was organized, surgical. They weren't just screwing with me. They were playing a long game. We filed for a temporary restraining order the same day to freeze all activity on the disputed section. Ben said it would take 48 to 72 hours before a judge even glanced at it. Meanwhile, I wasn't about to sit on my hands. I spent the rest of the day riding the north line of the property, snapping photos of every damn orange flag and plastic stakes some jackass had pounded into my soil. They were already carving up pasture, like this was theirs. On the third ridge, I found a stack of fencing materials, fresh cedar posts, barbed wire, concrete. Someone had prepped a staging site. They were planning to build on my land. Not propose, not negotiate. Build. I burned the rest of the daylight checking cameras, repairing broken gates, and making a list of everything I'd need to reinforce the perimeter. It was exhausting, but I felt more alive than I had in years. Someone wanted a fight, and by God, they'd get one. That night, around sunset, a kid showed up at my gate, 20-something, lean, long hair tucked under a sweat-stained cap. He had a backpack and a smile that said, "I don't know trouble, but I'm real friendly with bad ideas." "Hey there," he called out. "Name's Jeremy. Heard you might be looking for a hand." I stared at him over the fence. "From who?" "Farmer down the road. I helped him out last season, said you got a hell of a spread up here and might need someone to fix fence, move hay, whatever." He had that hungry, dust-bitten look I knew too well. Probably sleeping in his truck. I could have sent him packing, but I figured, hell, better he work than wander. And I could use an extra pair of hands with HOA vultures circling. I gave him the bunkhouse, a simple canvas cot, and told him I'd feed him if he worked. We shook on it over chili and cornbread. The boy asked a lot of questions. How much land I had, what kind of legal trouble I was in, where I kept the old documents. Said he was just curious about land rights, and I brushed it off as a young man trying to sound smart. I'd been there once too. The next 2 days were quiet. Too quiet. Jeremy was up early, helpful, efficient. He knew how to mend fence, oil hinges, Even handled horses better than most college kids. I started to think maybe I'd misjudged him. He even installed 2 new trail cameras for me without being asked. Meanwhile, HOA wasn't slowing down. I got 3 more letters, one accusing me of public nuisance conditions, another demanding I remove unauthorized livestock, and a third threatening daily fines of $1,000 per violation if I didn't comply by the end of the week. It would have been funny if it weren't so goddamn brazen. Ben told me we'd likely get the restraining order, but warned me to watch my back. If they've gone this far, they're not going to stop at paperwork, he said. He was right. That night, while checking the trail cams, I noticed something off. Camera 3 had gone dark, just a static screen. I hiked out to the hill behind the barn where it was mounted and found it turned sideways, like someone had twisted it by hand. The SD card was missing. Only 2 people had access to that location, me and Jeremy. I didn't accuse him, not yet, but I made a mental note and checked the bunkhouse after he went to bed. Nothing out of place, but his phone was charging by the cot. I couldn't resist. I took a quick glance. Locked. Fine. I'd wait. The next morning, I woke up to find a drone hovering over my house. Low, deliberate, loud. I walked out with my shotgun slung casually across my shoulder. It zipped away faster than a teenager after curfew. Jeremy came out of the barn chewing a granola bar, watching it leave. They really watching you like that? I didn't answer. I started to feel the creep in my bones. Not just legal battle. This was strategic warfare now. They had eyes, maps, insiders, and I was sitting on their jackpot. But I still had something they didn't. Roots. And I wasn't planning to be uprooted anytime soon. I gave Jeremy another day to hang himself. He didn't. If anything, he tightened his act, rose earlier, worked harder, asked fewer questions. Whatever cracks I thought I saw were patched up fast. I almost started second-guessing myself. Maybe I was getting paranoid. Maybe the drone was just some bored teenager with a new toy. Maybe the missing SD card was a raccoon with a tech fetish. But then again, maybe I was right the first time. 3 days after we filed the restraining order, the activity kicked into high gear. A caravan of trucks pulled up along the dirt access road to the North Ridge. 5 white pickups, 2 flatbeds, and a portable toilet that told me they weren't just surveying anymore. I saddled up that morning and rode out there just in time to see a group of men in reflective vests unloading rolls of fencing and a concrete mixer. They didn't even flinch when they saw me. "Who gave you permission to be here?" I asked, already knowing the answer. One guy glanced at a clipboard and said, "Cedar Hills HOA, Phase 2 Development. We're laying perimeter posts." I laughed the kind of laugh you give when you've been pushed halfway to murder. "This is private property," I said. "Not HOA jurisdiction, and if one post goes in the ground, you'll be pulling it out of your asses with surgical force." That got their attention. One of them muttered something into a radio. The others paused. The foreman came over, gray-bearded, corporate polo, clippered in one hand, and a cell phone in the other. "I suggest you call whoever signed that work order and tell them you've just trespassed." He smirked. "We were told this section's under Cedar Hills control." "You were told wrong." He started to argue, but I was already pulling my phone out. "Smile," I said, snapping photos of license plates and company logos. "This is evidence, and by the time the sheriff's done with you, that clipboard'll be your toilet paper in county lockup." They packed up fast after that. When I got back to the ranch, I found Jeremy sitting on the porch, reading an old copy of Texas Monthly like he had nowhere better to be. "Everything all right out there?" he asked. I didn't answer, just went inside and reviewed camera footage. Every damn cam was functional except camera 4, which covered the North Ridge. Feed cut out for 40 minutes. Power had been switched off at the box. Too clean. Too deliberate. I walked back out and leaned against the porch rail. Jeremy kept flipping pages like nothing was wrong. "You didn't happen to see anyone messing with the camera lines, did you?" He looked up. "Nope. I was out back feeding the horses." He held my gaze a beat too long. Then he smiled. That night, I didn't sleep. I spent it reviewing footage, checking locks, cleaning my shotgun. Something about Jeremy didn't sit right. His work was too efficient, his presence too casual, and yet I had no proof. Just a gut feeling and a growing pile of coincidences. The next morning, I woke to find another envelope nailed to my front gate. Real old-school HOA intimidation tactic. Inside was a notice of $3,000 in fines for non-compliance with community landscape standards, citing tall grass and dangerous livestock proximity to future residential pathways. They even included a photo, one of my bulls grazing near a mesquite tree, a photo I hadn't taken, a photo from my own trail cam angle. I slammed the gate shut and stormed inside. "Jeremy," I called. He stepped out of the bunkhouse looking half asleep. "Yeah? You been using any of my cameras for side projects?" He blinked. "No, sir, I wouldn't touch those." His tone was right, his face unreadable. I just nodded, said nothing, and walked back inside. Ben called around noon. "We got the TRO," he said. "Temporary freeze on any construction or annexation attempts. We serve them tomorrow." "That won't stop them," I said. "No," he admitted, "but it gives us grounds to escalate. You get any new pressure?" I told him about the new notice, about the photo. There was silence on the line for a beat too long. "Sounds like they've got someone close," Ben finally said. "I know," I said, watching Jeremy from the window as he coiled a hose. "I just don't know how close." The following day, Cedar Hills fired back. An official email from their Community Integrity Department informed me they'd received multiple reports of unpermitted firearm discharge on my property, referencing the drone I'd discouraged with a 12 gauge. I called the sheriff before they could. Sheriff Molina had known me for 20 years. He sighed audibly over the phone. "James, I'll file it as a non-incident. You're within your rights, but they're poking the bear now. Be careful. Poking the bear." Indeed. That evening, I did my rounds. North pasture, tool shed, south fence line. When I came back around to the barn, I caught movement near the back of the bunkhouse. A silhouette. I crept up, slow and silent. Jeremy was on his phone, talking low and fast. "He's suspicious. We need to move sooner. If he—" The gravel shifted under my boot, and he spun around. We stared at each other. I didn't say a word. Neither did he. He tucked his phone away and nodded slowly, like he knew the game was up. "I should go," he said. I just nodded. He left with his backpack slung over one shoulder, disappearing down the long dirt road. I didn't stop him, didn't need to. I had enough now, enough to know I wasn't paranoid, enough to know this was coordinated, enough to know the enemy wasn't just outside the gate anymore. They'd been eating breakfast under my roof. The morning after Jeremy left, the bunkhouse was as silent as a church on Monday. I walked in and stood there a minute, letting the quiet settle. His cot was bare. The air smelled faintly of diesel and leather and something else, something like betrayal. I pulled open the drawer of the old dresser he'd been using and found nothing except a cheap burner phone charger and an HOA branded pen. Sloppy, I called Ben and told him everything. The phone call, the missing footage, the false citations, the pen. He didn't sound surprised. "You think he was on their payroll?" "Or he's related to someone who is," I said. He was too comfortable, knew too much. It wasn't random. I'll have my PI run his name. In the meantime, we served the restraining order today. You ready?" "Born ready." Ben showed up that afternoon in his beat-up Silverado with the documents in a thick manila envelope. We drove straight to the Cedar Hills HOA office, a glassy little building sandwiched between a frozen yogurt shop and a boutique that sold overpriced candles shaped like cacti. The irony didn't escape me. The receptionist was a young woman who looked like she hated being alive, and especially hated being at work. "We're here to serve legal notice," Ben said, setting the envelope on the counter. She blinked. "Do you have an appointment?" "We do now," I said, smiling like I wasn't imagining their walls on fire. She disappeared into the back, and a moment later, Karen emerged. I hadn't seen her since she tried to flash claim half my ranch. She looked exactly the same. Perfect hair, ironed blouse, the expression of someone who believed authority was hereditary. "Mr. Rhodes," she said coldly. "Karen." She eyed the envelope. "I assume this is in response to our notices." Ben stepped forward. "It's a temporary restraining order issued by Judge McCleary. Effective immediately, you are to cease all activity, construction, or claims related to the 500 acres in question. Further action will be considered a violation of the court's directive." Karen didn't even flinch. We were acting on county data. If there's been an error— "There was," I cut in, "and your people knew it." She smiled like a rattlesnake yawning. "I assure you, Cedar Hills acts in accordance with all applicable zoning standards." Ben chuckled. "And we'll be delighted to explore that under oath." We turned and left without another word. Back at the ranch, I felt a strange kind of calm settle over me, like the eye of the storm had finally arrived. I knew it wouldn't last, but I was no longer reacting. I was fighting. That night, I did something I never thought I'd do. I went public. Ben's son helped me set up a YouTube channel. We called it My Ranch, Not Yours, and posted a 15-minute video explaining everything. How HOA tried to annex private land using a clerical error. How they sent in a spy. How they falsified fines and photos. I showed drone footage, maps, property records, and even Jeremy's burner phone charger. The video took off like dry grass in August. By morning, it had over 10,000 views. By noon, 25. By sundown, nearly 60,000. Comments poured in from all over. Ranchers, lawyers, retirees, pissed off homeowners who'd tangled with HOAs in their own towns. I went from crazy old farmer yelling at clouds to Texas land rights hero in less than a day. And that's when the real backlash started. Karen fired off a formal statement calling my video defamatory and misleading. She accused me of spreading misinformation to incite public hostility against community institutions. I responded with a second video. No yelling, no threats, just the map, the flawed parcel overlay, the original deed, a screenshot of the county zoning change history that listed the 500-acre correction as pending review since March. And then I stared dead into the camera. I don't care what your HOA bylaws say. You don't get to vote your way into my property. You want to fight? You got one. By the third day, local news picked up the story, then regional outlets. A morning show host in Dallas called it the Red Dirt Standoff. I even got a call from someone claiming to represent a state senator interested in landowner abuse cases. Karen started squirming. HOA's public relations team fired back by claiming I'd threatened staff with firearms. Sheriff Molina personally called the network and debunked it live on air. Mr. Rhodes is within his legal rights. No crimes have been committed. Meanwhile, neighbors in Cedar Hills began whispering. I got 2 anonymous letters in my mailbox, both from residents saying they'd had enough. One called the HOA a den of snakes and cardigans. Another apologized for not speaking up sooner. I started noticing small changes. Some houses taking down HOA flags, some homeowners posting supportive signs. Private land is sacred. Road stands. We stand. Even the sheriff's deputy, when patrolling the area, rolled down the window and said, "Hell of a campaign you got going, James." Not a campaign, I said. It's a reminder. Of what? That some of us still remember what freedom tastes like. He nodded and drove off. That night, I poured myself 2 fingers of bourbon and stood on my porch watching the moonlight stretch across the fields. The northern fence line looked quiet, peaceful, but I knew better. Peace doesn't mean the fight's over. It just means your enemies are regrouping. I woke up to the sound of chainsaws. Not birds, not coyotes, not even the usual groan of a windmill. Chainsaws. I threw on my boots, grabbed my rifle, not loaded, but they didn't need to know that, and stormed out the door. Dust already hung in the morning air like smoke. Out past the northern pasture, a construction crew in reflective vests was clearing mesquite along the ridgeline. They'd crossed the fence. They were on my land. Again. This time, they weren't just staking lines. They were cutting brush, carving out access, and hauling in rebar. One of them had the gall to wave at me, like we were neighbors meeting at a goddamn block party. I didn't wave back. Instead, I called Ben. "They're building again," I said. He didn't ask where. "I'll call the sheriff. Get me video." Already ahead of him, I mounted my four-wheeler and sped toward the site, phone in hand, camera rolling. As I got closer, one of the crew stepped forward holding a laminated document. It was another so-called work permit from Cedar Hills HOA. "This has been vacated by court order," I told them. "You're trespassing." "We were told the order expired." "It hasn't." They looked uncertain, but not enough to stop. So I stood between them and the next tree. "I'm not moving," I said calmly. "And if you start that saw again, I swear you'll need a new pair of ears." I meant every word. They backed off. Not all the way, but enough. One of them made a call, and soon they were packing up. Slowly, defiantly, like it was their choice. When I got back, I posted the footage. Within an hour, it had 50,000 views. By sunset, 120. People were furious. Not just locals, ranchers from Wyoming, Arizona, hell, even Alaska were flooding the comments. The sheriff called me personally that night. I sent a deputy to their office, Melina said. HOA claims they got revised guidance from a county official named Curtis Havel. Never heard of him. He's a zoning liaison. One of the guys who signs off on planning docs says he thought your land was part of a disputed buffer zone. And did he think that before or after someone bought him a new truck? The sheriff sighed. We're digging into it. Ben called 20 minutes later. James, you might want to sit down for this. I'm already drinking. That counts. He didn't laugh. I got access to the county archives, the physical ones, not just the digital maps. Guess what I found? Tell me. A land use restriction filed by your father in 1989. It designates the 500 northern acres as part of a generational trust. That land cannot be annexed, rezoned, or reassigned without consent from the registered beneficiary. That's you. I went quiet. It was buried, misfiled. The clerk says it was scanned during digitization but never indexed properly. I felt my jaw clench. So even if their annexation was legal, which it's not, it's blocked by this trust. Exactly. And it supersedes HOA claims. The only reason they got this far is because that document was missing from the digital chain. But now we have it. I stared out at the land from my porch. 500 acres of rolling brush, hills, history, and now ammunition. Get it certified, I said. We're going to war. That night, I met with 3 neighboring landowners, folks I hadn't spoken to in months, some in years. All of them had heard the story, seen the videos. One by one, they said the same thing. We thought we were safe. Turns out, Cedar Hills had their eyes on other properties too, smaller lots, maybe 50 or 100 acres apiece, but enough to turn them into cul-de-sacs with names like Silver Coyote or Vista Hill Estates. HOA was preparing more quiet annexations, using the same glitch-ridden county overlays to claim integration rights. This wasn't about me. It was a goddamn land grab. Together, we started organizing. One of them, Bill Younger, was a retired pipeline surveyor with decades of property experience. He mapped out the real boundary lines using old USGS maps and overlaid them with the HOA's proposal. The mismatch was laughable. Another neighbor, Rebecca Chen, was a former environmental compliance officer. She started digging into permits and discovered Cedar Hills had filed false environmental impact assessments to justify emergency utility easements over private land. They said your pasture is vacant greenfield property with no significant use. She said, I've grazed cattle there for 30 damn years. They know that, she replied. They just don't care. That's when it really sank in. This was systemic, coordinated, weaponized bureaucracy, but they weren't counting on us linking arms. And they sure as hell weren't counting on a worn-out cowboy with a camera and a lawyer who smelled blood. By week's end, we had a coalition of 6 landowners, a growing list of whistleblower documents, and the trust deed signed and notarized. HOA hadn't backed down, but neither had we. They blinked first. After weeks of silence and defiance, Cedar Hills HOA issued a community bulletin through their website, an ugly little PDF wrapped in pastel borders and fake pleasantries. It claimed they had acted in good faith based on county data and were cooperating fully with all legal processes. But buried in paragraph 4 was the real news. The board of directors has accepted the resignation of President Karen Lansdale, effective immediately. Resigned. They made it sound polite, like she'd stepped down to spend more time with her begonias. I knew better. This wasn't a resignation. It was a quiet ejection before the hull cracked wide open. I poured myself a cup of black coffee and reread the bulletin 3 times. It didn't smell like victory. It smelled like desperation. The same day, Ben got a call from a man named Marcus Drayton, a former junior board member at the HOA. He was ready to talk, said he'd been kept in the dark about most of the land maneuvers, and was done protecting people who thought HOA meant Holy Overlord Authority. Ben arranged a private interview and recorded every word. Marcus handed over copies of internal emails, meeting notes, and memos, one of which detailed contingency planning in case of legal pushback from roads or similar outliers. Outliers. I chewed on that word for a long time. According to Marcus, Karen had gone rogue for over a year, pushing through zoning requests, authorizing legal threats, and even contracting surveyors without full board approval. She had a direct line to Curtis Havel, the county liaison who greenlit the erroneous map overlay. Marcus said he always suspected they were close, not just professionally. We handed the recordings to the local news. Within 24 hours, it was all over the evening broadcast. HOA president accused of illegal annexation targeted harassment. Karen's face lit up every television in a 60-mile radius, framed between damning quotes and legal jargon, and oh, how the mighty wilted. The day after the segment aired, I noticed something new in the HOA-controlled parts of the neighborhood. People were ripping out the little white Cedar Hills flags that lined their yards. One woman, a quiet widow named Helen Morse, emailed me directly. Mr. Rhodes, I didn't know. I believed what they told us. I'm sorry for staying silent. If you ever need help with your land again, I'll be there. I printed that one and pinned it to the fridge. But not everyone took the scandal quietly. The HOA board, what was left of it, scrambled to salvage the structure. They called an emergency community meeting to address misinformation. We weren't invited, of course. But one of my neighbors, Rebecca Chen, slipped in unnoticed. She filmed the whole thing. The video was grainy, but the sound was crystal. The interim board tried spinning the situation as miscommunication and rapid development outpacing our infrastructure. But when a homeowner asked, "Did you falsify documents to annex Mr. Rhodes's property?" the room went silent. Then someone else shouted, "And what about the drone footage, the fences, the fake fines?" It turned into a verbal shootout. Rebecca uploaded the full video to our coalition's channel that night. We titled it, "The Collapse of Cedar Hills Behind Closed Doors." Within 48 hours, the video hit 200,000 views. People were angry, not just for me, but for what HOA culture had become, a tool for petty tyrants with too much authority and not enough accountability. And the worst part, Karen still wasn't done. We discovered she had quietly formed a private land development advisory group and was lobbying to convert the disputed 500 acres into a commercial opportunity zone using federal stimulus loopholes tied to underdeveloped community corridors. She was going federal. I forwarded everything to Ben. He laughed, but it wasn't a happy laugh. She's desperate. She knows the HOA angle is toast. Now she's trying to shift the narrative. Can we stop her? Yes, but not quietly. So we went loud. That weekend, we held a rally. Not some protest with signs and chants. We're ranchers, not activists. But we held a public land use workshop right on the edge of my property. Fold-out tables, shade tents, slow-cooked brisket, and printed maps showing the real borders. We invited press, families, retired vets, city council reps, and more. I stood up on the flatbed of my hay trailer and laid it out. This land wasn't overlooked. It was targeted, and I'm not the only one. We've got proof. We've got documents, and we've got eyes now. Millions of them. A cheer went up. For a moment, I didn't feel like a man alone on a ranch. I felt like the start of something bigger. Ben handed out folders with certified copies of the trust deed. Reporters asked questions. Cameras clicked. And somewhere in the middle of it all, Sheriff Molina pulled me aside. "We opened an investigation into Havel," he said. "Got some calls from the state attorney's office, too. They're sniffing around." "What about Karen?" "Won't say much. But let's just say she's not just losing titles. She might lose freedom." I nodded. It wasn't vindication. Not yet. But it was a damn good start. The subpoena came on a Tuesday. Certified mail. Heavy envelope. The kind of thing that makes your stomach coil before you even open it. Inside was a formal summons. Rhodes v. Cedar Hills HOA et al. They were suing me. Technically, they were seeking judicial clarification regarding land use boundaries in light of conflicting records and disputed trust designations. In plain English, they were trying to override the deed my father left me. Ben read through the whole thing in silence, jaw tight, brow low. "This is their last card," he said. "They know they're losing in the court of public opinion, so they're trying to get a judge to redraw the lines. Can they? Not if we make it to court with the trust intact and the original map chain validated. But they're going to drag this through procedural mud. They're hoping to stall you out, break you financially or emotionally." I looked at the documents spread out on my kitchen table. Years of history, maps, county letters, affidavits, the bones of my family. "Then we hold the line," I said. Ben smiled. "Damn right." But the next hit didn't come from HOA. It came from Washington. A letter from the Office of Federal Land Management, citing Karen's newly formed development consortium, claimed that parts of the disputed area were now under review for eligibility as an economic reinvestment zone. It didn't say much, just that they were assessing potential community benefit and infrastructure potential. I knew what it meant. She was bypassing the county and going straight to the feds. If they greenlit the zone, it would open the door to eminent domain challenges, even if temporary. This wasn't just local greed anymore. This was federal-level bureaucracy, laced with legalese, ready to swallow everything. I didn't say anything for an hour, just sat on the porch watching the horizon until the wind picked up and brought that dry smell of mesquite and dust. I didn't feel defeated. I felt dangerous. I called the coalition together that night. Rebecca, Bill, Helen, 3 others. We met in my barn, chairs circled around a gas heater, printouts taped to plywood, notes scribbled in Sharpie on feed bags. We're not just fighting HOA anymore, I told them. We're fighting a woman who's playing Monopoly with people's lives. She's found a back door, and she's trying to kick it open before we lock it shut. Bill held up the latest plat map overlay. We've got every inch of surveyed land logged. Her claim overlaps with 4 different trust parcels. If they move on this federally, it's fraud. Rebecca chimed in. And I found the company she's fronting with, Y-Rock Capital. They're tied to a developer in Arizona that's already under investigation for illegal land seizures. That was the moment I knew we had to go all in. Ben filed for an emergency injunction against federal review, citing potential fraud, misrepresentation of ownership, and abuse of process. The judge granted a preliminary freeze, but it wouldn't last long. We needed a full hearing, fast. The courthouse was packed, not just with lawyers and press, but with locals, ranchers, veterans, even college kids with cameras. People stood along the back wall, some sitting on the floor. This wasn't just Rhodes v. HOA anymore. This was a referendum. The HOA sent their new president, some wet paper man in a bow tie who looked like he'd never stepped on a dirt road in his life. Karen didn't show, but we had Marcus, the whistleblower. He sat in front of the judge and confirmed every detail: unauthorized claims, internal manipulation, backroom deals. When asked why he came forward, he looked at me, then back at the court. Because they tried to erase a man's legacy for profit. That ain't what community means. The room was dead silent. Ben walked the court through the trust deed, the misfiled document, the video footage, the drone, the SD cards, the phony citations, and the maps that proved it all. It took 4 hours. Then the judge leaned forward, took off his glasses, and asked the question we all feared. Why didn't this come up during the initial annexation process? Ben didn't blink. Because the database was broken, Your Honor. The trust deed was never uploaded, and the HOA took advantage of a bureaucratic blind spot. They weren't just misled, they weaponized the county's mistake. The judge nodded slowly. Then he did something no one expected. He called a recess, not for the day, for 10 minutes. When he came back, he had a ruling. He declared the 500 acres in question indisputably protected under generational trust, legally exempt from HOA authority, zoning overlays, or federal reinvestment review without express written consent of the beneficiary, me. He also issued a judicial reprimand against Cedar Hills HOA for acting recklessly and deceptively in pursuit of unauthorized land acquisition. And then, icing on the cake, he referred Karen Lansdale and Curtis Havel to the State Attorney General's office for possible criminal investigation into collusion and fraud. The room exploded. Gasps, applause, a few whoops from the back. The bailiff tried to keep order, but even he was grinning. I didn't celebrate. I just stood there, steady, boots planted like roots. Karen wasn't there to see her empire crumble, but I could feel her absence like a shadow pulling back from the light. This wasn't over, but the battlefield was mine again. It rained the next morning. Not a hard storm, but steady, the kind that soaks into the soil instead of running off. A good rain, a rancher's rain. I stepped onto the porch with my coffee in one hand and the trust deed in the other, now sealed, certified, and archived in 3 different places, both digital and physical. I'd even made a copy laminated and bolted inside my tool shed. No one was taking this land again, not while I breathed. The media circus died down in the following weeks, but the fallout for Cedar Hills didn't. The State Attorney General's office opened a formal investigation into Karen Lansdale and Curtis Havel. According to Ben, federal agents even visited the HOA office with sealed subpoenas in hand. They seized hard drives, minutes from private board meetings, and financial records. Turns out, this whole operation went deeper than we thought. There were 6 other properties targeted in 3 counties, all using the same tactics: glitched overlays, sudden HOA integration notices, quiet fines meant to force landowners into submission. Some folks had already sold under pressure, thinking they were in the wrong. Others had just started fighting. Now they weren't alone. Our coalition became something more. We called ourselves Frontier Watch, a nonprofit dedicated to landowner rights and digital property integrity. Ben helped register it. Rebecca built the infrastructure. Bill started running workshops for landowners to check the accuracy of their GIS records. We even got a grant from a foundation that supported rural legal defense. What started as my battle turned into a movement. As for Karen, she tried to disappear, but you don't get to cause that much damage and vanish quietly. The AG filed charges: wire fraud, abuse of public process, falsification of zoning data. Curtis Havel flipped almost immediately, trading testimony for reduced charges. Karen wasn't just the architect, she was the machine. And the machine broke. The last I heard, she was out on bail, her assets frozen, pending federal trial. Some folks online joked that she was applying to be the president of her cell block's HOA. I didn't laugh, not because it wasn't funny, but because none of this was ever a joke to me. I nearly lost half my land, half my life, but I didn't. Not because I was the loudest, because I was the last one standing. The funny thing is, the fight changed me. Before all this, I didn't talk much, didn't trust people, didn't ask for help. But once I did, I found something I hadn't expected: neighbors. Not just the ones next door, but the ones miles away. Strangers who saw a man being pushed and said, "Not today." I kept my gate open more after that, held a few barbecues, even let some college kids camp out by the West Creek to study native grasses. I figured the land would outlast me. It deserved more than just fences and silence. One day, Helen Morse showed up with a plant. "A peace offering," she said, "for all the HOA crap." I planted it near the porch. A tough little mesquite that somehow still bloomed. We still keep an eye on the county's planning board, still audit the records every 6 months. Vigilance doesn't sleep, but for the first time in a long time, I do. The grass grew taller that spring. The cattle grazed deeper, and I stood at the fence line one afternoon, hat tipped low, boots dug in, and thought to myself, this land remembers who it belongs to. So do I.